Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today, we begin our mini-series on the topic of service. In particular, what constitutes devotional service? Now, we know that Bhakti is a word indicating devotional service. So today, we revisit the topic, but from a slightly different perspective or angle. In today's session, which is part 1 of our mini-series, we examine what service means materially, meaning when we look out at this material world that we're living in, what does service look like? How do people tend to approach service? After discussing this, we'll look at service from the spiritual perspective. Now, first, if we look the word service up in the dictionary, for the kind of service we're indicating anyway, we find the definition contribution to the welfare of others. And I think we can all agree that when we think of the word service, we think of helping others. But just who are the others? What others do we help when we perform welfare service? Well, some people would say service is meant for helping other humans and would support humanitarian activities. But then the question becomes all humans, or perhaps underprivileged humans? Humans in our country or other countries? Others may be in support of helping humans and animals, but perhaps just some animals, say animals that are pets in this country like cats or dogs. Still others may see the equality of all living beings and be in support of helping all life. The point here is that materially, or how service is approached in this material world, service is a little subjective, depending on a person's beliefs and inclinations, and thus we find that there are many different charitable organizations and social welfare services in this world. And that brings us to our next question. What kind of service should we focus on? With all the different kinds of humanitarian organizations, social welfare services, organizations that respond in case of disaster, etc., then is it just a question of which one is right for me? Do I just go with what resonates with me? Mostly that's what we tend to do, right? We identify a cause that is meaningful to us. Of course, these organizations on screen are necessary in trying to do good work in the world. At the end of chapter 1 of the Gita, Krishna himself refers to the fact that in a healthy society with healthy leaders, there will be welfare organizations that address the bodily and mental needs of the people. However, Krishna also notes later in the Gita that the material world is dukhalayam, a place of miseries or suffering. So it's really a statement on the nature of the material world that so much welfare work is required. And we see that, don't we? The nature of the material world is what necessitates the existence of different welfare services. Now, again, from our above examination, we can already see that materially, service is subjective. People find a cause that seems important to them personally and then join the effort in helping out. Now, our next question may be, what is our motive for service? Are we doing it for a sense of recognition? Maybe our name will be on a plaque somewhere. Or might we be doing it because it gives us a feeling of satisfaction? It makes us feel good inside. Or are we doing it because we feel obligated? Perhaps we need volunteer hours for an honor society or something like that. There can be so many reasons for engaging in service in the material sense, right? Well, interestingly, charity, giving in charity to others, is a topic specifically addressed in the Gita. Krishna explains the different material motives for giving in charity in the Gita, and of course, what he says can extend out to all different kinds of material welfare services. So now we're going to put on our spiritual lenses or glasses. While we have not had a discussion of them yet, in the Gita, Krishna describes what are known as the three modes of material nature. And these three modes of nature are subtle forces that influence our behavior as well as every aspect of our physical, mental, and emotional being. The Sanskrit term for these forces is guna, or rope, and the Gita explains how these modes of nature pull us to act in various ways, even against our better judgment. But importantly, they never take away our free will. We may be pulled in certain directions, but we always have our free will. We're always free to choose. Now, while we'll cover these modes of nature in depth in a future discussion, a quick overview of these modes of material nature will serve our purposes here. So let's take a quick look at the characteristics of each mode. Sattva guna is the mode of goodness, and it manifests as an atmosphere of peace, tranquility, and harmony in our environment and within ourselves. In this state, contentment, philosophical inquiry, and emotional stability are prevalent in our lives. We feel satisfied when the mode of goodness prevails in our life. By contrast, Rajoguna, the mode of passion, is characterized by an unending thirst for temporary pleasures, a relentless ambition and pursuit of more money, more fame, more influence, more beauty, and the dissatisfaction that comes with never being satisfied with what we have. We feel like nothing is ever enough when the mode of passion has the steering wheel in our lives. And finally, tamoguna, the mode of ignorance, manifests in the form of lethargy, depression, and inertia, indulgence in vices and intoxication, and irrational behavior. We'll feel like we're inactive or stuck, or we'll be tempted to rely on intoxicants for fleeting respite from the problems of this material world when the mode of ignorance is in control. Now, one thing that may strike you in this overview of the three modes is that we've all experienced aspects of the various modes at different times of our lives, and most often, all three at once. And indeed, like the three primary colors from which all other colors spring, the three modes, the three qualities of action, we might say, are mostly found as a mix. Few individuals are always purely good, or purely passionate, or purely in ignorance. Most people are acting and experiencing some combination of two or three modes at once. The real point to remember here is that all material actions and behaviors, and even things like foodstuffs, can be assigned to modes or combinations of the modes of nature. And what we can also see here is that there's clearly a hierarchy of the three modes, and we can see that if we act in the mode of goodness, that is higher or better than acting in, say, the mode of ignorance. But beyond the mode of goodness even is actually pure spiritual action, pure spiritual life. Bhakti yoga transcends the material modes of nature, and it enables us to transcend these three ropes that otherwise bind us to matter, to this material world. We'll talk about this more in a second. For now, it's important to remember that in the material world, the material modes of nature drive our motivation for and attraction to different kinds of activities, including charity work and any other welfare work we may perform in this material world. This means that whichever material modes are prominent in our lives at a given time will influence what kind of charity work we're attracted to materially. And that's pretty interesting, isn't it? So now let's turn to the verses in the Gita that look at charity work in terms of the modes of material nature. In chapter 17 of the Gita, Krishna says in text 20, "Charity given out of duty, without expectation of return, at the proper time and place, and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. And in his purport or explanation to this verse, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami or Srila Prabhupada writes, charity given to a person engaged in spiritual activities is recommended. There is no recommendation for giving charity indiscriminately. So, giving charity without expecting any return and to someone or some cause engaged in a worthy cause is charity in the mode of goodness. However, let's turn to text 21. Charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with a desire for fruitive or material results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. So, charity done out of self-interest, or with the motive of gaining some reward or recognition, is charity done under the influence of the mode of passion. Or, as the verse points out, charity given begrudgingly, like in the case of a Scrooge-type person who is very much attached to their wealth, that would be charity given in the mode of passion. And finally, charity performed at an improper place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Now you might ask, well, who's an unworthy person? The explanation to the verse clears this up. Srila Prabhupada writes, contributions for indulgence in intoxication and gambling are not encouraged here. That sort of contribution is in the mode of ignorance. Such charity is not beneficial, rather sinful persons are encouraged. So think of someone approaching you on the street and saying, hey, I need to buy a pack of cigarettes. Can you give me some money? In this case, if we gave money to them, it would be given in the mode of ignorance, as we're really just promoting that person's degradation, their mode of ignorance. Now, Srila Prabhupada mentions in a purport to this section in the Gita that people who don't actively practice spiritual life are elevated by giving in charity. If it's given in the mode of passion or goodness, or mixed passion and goodness, because such giving in charity raises the giver's consciousness. So even though their charity work is tinged by the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and a combination, still it holds that giving in charity in the material world is better than keeping everything for oneself. And that seems intuitive, right? But here at Bhakti Fundamentals, we're trying to cultivate higher knowledge of spiritual life, of Bhakti Yoga. And so the kind of charity or service we do won't fall under the material modes of nature. It won't be material. These Gita verses on screen are meant to show us that charity, as well as other welfare service activities in this world, are tinged by the modes of nature, and thus they affect our consciousness accordingly. Thus, not all charity in this world is equal. Some charitable actions are more in the mode of ignorance, others are more in the mode of passion, and others are more in the mode of goodness. But all the modes are at work in each case of charity. Materially, there are many gradations of charity and other forms of welfare activities, whereas spiritual service or devotional service is transcendental to the modes of material nature. Why? Because devotional service helps people to make spiritual advancement. It helps them to transcend the miseries of this material world altogether. Devotional service addresses the core or root problem, which is that we're spiritual beings in a material world at present. Whereas material service only helps the externals. It only helps or relieves the suffering of the bodies or minds of people or animals or other living entities. It doesn't reach them at the level of the soul. Without adding Krishna and without knowledge of the self, that every living entity is actually the soul, then material welfare service is just that. It's material. To this point, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, used the analogy of the ocean in regard to material welfare service. Now, often this world is compared to an ocean, the ocean of material life where repeated birth and death takes place. This world is an ocean of miseries, actually. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that when we engage in material welfare service that only addresses the externals, that is, and I quote him, like trying to empty the ocean with one's bare hands. He said, quote, even if thousands of people engage continuously in such an endeavor for thousands of years, they will never be successful in emptying the ocean. By doing so, they might cause a vast body of water to accumulate elsewhere. We cannot empty the vast ocean of material suffering by our own strength. At most, we will simply succeed in transferring the problems elsewhere. So that's what he said. And it means that material welfare work only helps the externals, but leaves the person in a different material situation. What is the real lasting benefit? Such material help is a horizontal or lateral move. It's a stopgap measure. It's not a final solution. It's like moving from a house in a bad neighborhood to a house in a really nice neighborhood. There will still be problems encountered even in that new house. If it's not the neighborhood, maybe it's one's job or one's family that's causing issues for us. As long as we're in this material world, there will always be material problems that we encounter. And trying to remove those material problems materially is like trying to empty the ocean with our bare hands. We need spiritual life to accomplish this. The permanent solution is to alert people about the purpose of the human form of life, to realize who we are in relation to the Supreme Lord, and to engage in the service of the Supreme. Whether people take Krishna's advice in the Gita is another issue, but at least we can spend our lives trying to inform people that it's not a different material situation that will make them lastingly happy. It's acting in their constitutional position as a servant of Krishna that will make them happy. Now, as a recap, whenever there's an action in the material world, the three material modes of nature are at work, and all kinds of combinations of them can result, all kinds of actions and behaviors and qualities of consciousness of the people performing them. So this means that materially, there are so many questions to consider when it comes to service. Questions like, what qualifies as service? To whom will I render that service? What kind of service will I do? What is my motivation for service? The list goes on and on. Service is subjective materially and tinged by the three material modes of nature. By contrast, in spiritual life, the approach to service is elegantly simple. Remember that bhakti is a word that means devotional service. Devotional service at heart comes down to one question. What can I do within my nature or inclinations that will harmonize or dovetail my life with the Supreme or Krishna? Because harmonizing our lives with the Supreme is going straight to the source, and it helps others harmonize their lives with the Supreme also. Krishna is the source of everything. So when we serve him, this is akin to watering the root of a plant or a tree instead of trying to water the individual leaves. When we go to the source, when we water the root, everything is nourished in the process. So in Bhakti Yoga, the goal is to serve Krishna, the root, but in the process, we're serving our teachers, our gurus, and the other devotees on the Bhakti Yoga Marga or path. And when we distribute this spiritual knowledge to others, then we're serving everyone on the level of the soul. Everyone is elevated when we dedicate our activities to Krishna. Now, the fact that the spiritual approach to service really boils down to this one question on screen is not to say that there is not variety in terms of what devotional service we will do. Actually, there's endless variety practically. But it does mean that our approach is very simple: to somehow or other link our activities, link our lives to the supreme absolute truth, to Krishna. So that's all we have for today. We'll be back next week with part 2, in which we'll really delve into devotional service and the variety in terms of devotional service. In the meantime, if you have any questions, let us know so that we can address them in our next discussion. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.